I still remember the smell of that room, a mixture of antiseptic and sadness, the kind of air that makes you whisper without realizing it, because you know life and death are listening. I was standing there, frozen, my hands trembling on the edge of the metal table, and beside me lay him, Max. He wasn't just a dog, he was the heartbeat that kept this old house alive after my wife passed away. For years he'd followed me everywhere, from the kitchen to the porch, from morning walks to long nights when loneliness crept in like fog. But that morning, he didn't move. When I called his name, he just stared at nothing. His breathing was shallow, his body limp, and I knew something was wrong. I rushed him to the vet, my heart pounding like it hadn't in years. The drive felt endless. Every red light, every bump on the road, I could hear his faint whimper, fading more each time. When we finally got there, the vet, Dr. Harris, took one look and sighed. He'd seen too many cases like this. Old dog, weak heart, and in his eyes, I could already read the truth he didn't want to say aloud. He ran a few tests, listened to Max's heartbeat, or tried to. Then he looked at me and whispered something I'll never forget. "He's gone, Mr. Bennett, I'm so sorry." The words didn't make sense. Gone? I reached out, my hand on Max's fur, still warm, still him. There was no way. I couldn't let go. I begged Dr. Harris to try again, anything. Another injection, oxygen, chest compressions, I didn't care. But he only placed a hand on my shoulder and shook his head. And in that silence, something inside me broke. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to breathe. I whispered his name again, one last time. Max. And that's when it happened. A twitch, barely noticeable. Then another. Dr. Harris leaned in, frowning. He placed his stethoscope back on Max's chest. And I swear, I saw his eyes widen. Wait. He has a pulse. My heart jumped. Max's paw twitched again, stronger this time. His chest rose, shallow but there. Then his eyes opened, not wide, not bright, but open, like a door that refused to stay shut. Dr. Harris stumbled back, muttering something about reflexes, about how it might just be a reaction, but I didn't care what he called it. To me, it was life. I leaned close, my tears falling onto his fur. "Hey, buddy, you're still here." And I swear I felt his tail move. At that moment, I didn't know if it was a miracle or a mistake. All I knew was that something had pulled him back, something neither of us could explain. But that was only the beginning, because what happened after had changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and love. The vet called it a spontaneous recovery, though his voice trembled when he said it. He'd never seen anything quite like it. Max was breathing again, weak but steady, his heartbeat irregular, yet undeniable. I sat beside him for hours, afraid that if I blinked he'd slip away again. Dr. Harris insisted I leave him overnight for observation, but I refused. I couldn't. After all, I'd already said goodbye once, I wasn't risking it again, so I stayed in that cold little room, wrapped in the sound of machines and the faint rhythm of Max's breath. Every now and then he'd stir, eyes half open, as if searching for me. I'd whisper, "I'm right here, buddy, you're safe." Around midnight, the clinic went quiet. The lights dimmed and the hum of the machines became the only voice in the room. My mind wandered back to the morning, to the sound of his bark echoing through the yard, to the way he'd nudge my hand when he wanted to go outside. It was hard to believe that just hours ago I thought I'd lost him forever. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke to a low whimper. Max was trying to lift his head. His eyes were clearer now, but there was something different in them, something I couldn't quite name. He looked at me in a way he never had before, almost knowing, like he'd been somewhere else and brought something back. Dr. Harris came in shortly after sunrise. He seemed shocked to see Max sitting up, tail weakly wagging. He ran his tests again and shook his head in disbelief. "He shouldn't have survived," he muttered. "Whatever happened to him, it's beyond medicine." When we finally went home, Max was quiet. Too quiet. He didn't run to his water bowl or bark at the neighbor's cat. He just followed me around the house, step by step, his eyes never leaving mine. That night I sat by the fireplace, a blanket wrapped around both of us. The silence was heavy, filled with questions I didn't know how to ask. Then, just as I started drifting to sleep, Max stood up and walked to the back door. He looked over his shoulder, waiting for me to follow. I thought he wanted to go outside, but when I opened the door, he didn't step out. He just stood there, staring into the darkness. The woods behind the house stretched far, and the air was still. Then I heard it, faint at first, like a whisper carried by the wind. A sound that didn't belong to the night. Max's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, something deep and unfamiliar. It sent a chill down my spine. I reached to pull him back inside, but he didn't move. He was staring at something I couldn't see, frozen as if waiting for a signal. I whispered, "Max, come here." But he didn't. He kept watching the tree line, his body tense, his breathing fast. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of light between the trees, faint, bluish, almost like a reflection. Then it was gone. I closed the door and locked it, my heart racing. Max finally turned, eyes still fixed on the dark glass. He sat by the door the whole night, never taking his gaze away. And as the hours passed, I started to wonder if maybe he hadn't come back alone. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows, but the warmth felt wrong, heavy, muted, as if the world itself was still half asleep. Max was still by the door, eyes bloodshot, fur slightly damp with dew from the crack beneath the frame. He hadn't slept at all. When I called him for breakfast, he didn't move. His bowl, the one he'd always devoured in seconds, stayed untouched. Instead, he turned his head slowly toward me, and for a moment I saw it again, that strange look, the one that didn't belong to him. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe he was still weak, confused. Maybe I was imagining things. But as I reached down to pet him, he flinched, not in pain, but as if startled. That had never happened before. He'd always leaned into my hand. Now he stepped back. I could feel something between us, something invisible and cold. I told myself it was just trauma, that he'd been through too much. Still, the thought wouldn't leave me. Max had died. He'd stopped breathing. And somehow, something had pulled him back. Over the next few days, little things began to happen. At night, Max would wander the house, pacing from room to room, growling softly at empty corners. I'd find him standing in the hallway, staring at the old photographs on the wall, especially one of my wife, Emily. He'd sit in front of it for hours, tail still, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Oh, once I caught him lifting his paw toward the frame, just resting it there as if he remembered her. But when I whispered her name, Emily, Max let out a sound I'd never heard before. Not a growl, not a whine. Something between the two. Mournful, distant, like he was trying to speak. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of the back door creaking open. I could have sworn I'd locked it. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs, calling Max's name. The living room was empty, the air colder than usual. When I turned toward the kitchen, I saw him, standing by the open door, his fur ruffling in the night wind. He wasn't looking outside anymore. He was looking up, his head tilted slightly, eyes following something that wasn't there. The beam of my flashlight caught his face, and that's when I saw it. His pupils were dilated, almost completely black. I called out to him again, louder this time, and he turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes blinked, once, twice, and suddenly he seemed normal again. Tail wagging faintly, stepping toward me like nothing had happened. I closed the door, heart pounding, and decided maybe I needed sleep more than answers. But the next morning I found muddy paw prints by the door, only they didn't match Max's size. These were larger, much larger. I started keeping notes, writing down every strange thing that happened. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? An old man losing his mind over his dog's miracle recovery. But deep down I knew something was wrong. There were moments, fleeting but real, when I'd catch Max staring at me as if he didn't recognize who I was. Moments when he'd walk past me, sniffing the air like he was searching for something else, someone else. Then 3 nights later I heard it again, that sound from the woods. Only this time it wasn't faint, it was closer, a low rhythmic humming that made the windows vibrate. Max ran to the back door barking wildly, fur standing on end. I grabbed a flashlight and followed him outside. The air was icy, and the forest was glowing faintly, a dim, pulsing light deep between the trees. Max didn't hesitate. He took off running faster than I'd seen him move since before the illness. I shouted his name, but he didn't stop. The light grew brighter as he disappeared into the dark. By the time I reached the tree line, the light was gone. The forest was silent. Only the sound of my breath filled the night. I called for him again and again until my voice broke. No answer. Just the quiet rustle of leaves and the echo of something I couldn't explain. I stood there for what felt like hours before heading back inside, my heart heavy. When I closed the door, I turned and froze. Max was sitting by the fireplace. His fur was dry. His eyes were calm. He was already home. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My brain tried to find logic, any explanation that would make sense. Maybe I'd imagined chasing him. Maybe I was half asleep. But the mud on my shoes, the cold sweat on my neck, the open back door, none of that was a dream. Max sat there quietly, his head slightly tilted, watching me with that same unreadable calm. The fireplace flickered, and for an instant his shadow stretched across the floor, unnaturally tall, almost human in shape. I blinked, and it was gone. He wagged his tail softly, as if nothing was wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound, every creak of the old house felt louder, heavier. Around 3 a.m, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, too heavy to be Max's. I grabbed the flashlight again, my heart racing. When I opened my bedroom door, Max was there, staring at me from the end of the corridor. But he wasn't alone. For a split second, I saw a figure beside him, pale, translucent, like smoke curling in the dark. Then it vanished, and Max trotted toward me, calm as ever. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, grief, or maybe the medication I'd started taking to help me sleep. But deep inside, I knew this was something else. Every time Max looked into the empty air, my stomach twisted. Sometimes his eyes would track something, an invisible, deliberate, moving from one corner of the room to another. I started keeping the lights on at night. I wasn't afraid of the dark before. Now I was terrified of what it might reveal. A week later, Dr. Harris called to check in. I told him Max was fine, though the lie burned in my throat. Before hanging up, I asked, "Have you ever seen anything like what happened to him? An animal, coming back like that?" There was a long pause. Then his voice lowered. "Once," he said. "Years ago, same symptoms, same collapse, same recovery." He cleared his throat, uneasy. "But the dog didn't stay the same afterward. He became aggressive, paranoid, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Then one night, he disappeared." My blood ran cold. I wanted to ask more, but Dr. Harris just said, "Keep an eye on him," and hung up. That evening, I watched Max closely. He was pacing again, restless, whining softly at the back door. I decided to test something. I placed my old wristwatch, one that hadn't worked in years, in front of him. He sniffed it, then growled low, his ears flattening. When I picked it back up, the watch hands had moved. Just slightly, a few seconds ahead, I felt dizzy. My house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt borrowed. Like I was living inside someone else's story. Later that night, I dreamed of Emily for the first time in years. She was standing in the woods behind the house, wearing the same blue dress from the photograph. Her hair moved gently in the wind, and she smiled. But her eyes were filled with tears. She reached out, pointing toward something behind her. The trees shifted, and there was Max sitting beside her. But not the Max I knew. His fur was darker, his eyes bright with that same strange light from the forest. I tried to call out, but no sound came. She whispered something I couldn't hear, then everything went black. When I woke, Max was lying beside my bed, staring straight at me. His fur was wet. There were pine needles stuck to his paws. I looked toward the window. It was open. The woods beyond were silent. I knew then that whatever had happened that night, he came back. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My brain tried to find logic, any explanation that would make sense. Maybe I'd imagined chasing him. Maybe I was half asleep. But the mud on my shoes, the cold sweat on my neck, the open back door, none of that was a dream. Max sat there quietly, his head slightly tilted, watching me with that same unreadable calm. The fireplace flickered, and for an instant his shadow stretched across the floor, unnaturally tall, almost human in shape. I blinked, and it was gone. He wagged his tail softly, as if nothing was wrong. That night I didn't sleep. Every sound, every creak of the old house felt louder, heavier. Around 3 in the morning, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, too heavy to be Max's. I grabbed the flashlight again, my heart racing. When I opened my bedroom door, Max was there, staring at me from the end of the corridor. But he wasn't alone. For a split second, I saw a figure beside him, pale, translucent, like smoke curling in the dark. Then it vanished, and Max trotted toward me, calm as ever. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, grief, or maybe the medication I'd started taking to help me sleep. But deep inside, I knew this was something else. Every time Max looked into the empty air, my stomach twisted. Sometimes his eyes would track something, invisible, deliberate, moving from one corner of the room to another. I started keeping the lights on at night. I wasn't afraid of the dark before. Now I was terrified of what it might reveal. A week later, Dr. Harris called to check in. I told him Max was fine, though the lie burned in my throat. Before hanging up, I asked, "Have you ever seen anything like what happened to him? An animal, coming back like that?" There was a long pause. Then his voice lowered. "Once," he said. "Years ago, same symptoms, same collapse, same recovery." He cleared his throat, uneasy. But the dog didn't stay the same afterward. He became aggressive, paranoid, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Then one night, he disappeared. My blood ran cold. I wanted to ask more, but Dr. Harris just said, "Keep an eye on him," and hung up. That evening, I watched Max closely. He was pacing again, restless, whining softly at the back door. I decided to test something. I placed my old wristwatch, one that hadn't worked in years, in front of him. He sniffed it, then growled low, his ears flattening. When I picked it back up, the watch hands had moved, just slightly, a few seconds ahead. I felt dizzy. My house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt borrowed, like I was living inside someone else's story. Later that night, I dreamed of Emily for the first time in years. She was standing in the woods behind the house, wearing the same blue dress from the photograph. Her hair moved gently in the wind, and she smiled. But her eyes were filled with tears. She reached out, pointing towards something behind her. The trees shifted, and there was Max, sitting beside her. But not the Max I knew. His fur was darker, his eyes bright with that same strange light from the forest. I tried to call out, but no sound came. She whispered something I couldn't hear, then everything went black. When I woke, Max was lying beside my bed, staring straight at me. His fur was wet. There were pine needles stuck to his paws. I looked toward the window. It was open. The woods beyond were silent. I knew then that whatever had happened that night, he came back. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. I couldn't breathe. The sound of that turning doorknob filled the entire room, slow, deliberate, click by click. Max's fur bristled. He didn't bark this time. He just stood, ears flat, muscles trembling, staring at the door as if he already knew what was on the other side. I whispered his name, but he didn't look back. The final click echoed, and the door opened halfway. No wind, no draft, just silence. Then something unseen crossed the threshold. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, a sudden drop in temperature, the kind that makes your breath turn white. The camera's red light blinked. The lens caught something, a flicker, a faint shimmer in the air like heat above asphalt. Max took a step forward, his paws pressing against the floorboards that creaked under the weight of something else. My mind screamed to run, to close the door, to pray, anything. But I couldn't move. I was pinned to the couch, trapped between fear and disbelief. Then I heard the whisper again, Emily's voice, softer this time, close to my ear. "You shouldn't have called him back." My chest tightened. I turned my head slowly, and for a split second I saw her, sitting beside me. Her face pale, her eyes full of sorrow, her hand resting gently on mine. But when I blinked, she was gone. The space beside me was empty. Max whimpered once, as if sensing the same thing. I stumbled toward the camera, trying to grab it to shut it off, but the screen went black before I touched it. All the lights in the house flickered and died. I was left in complete darkness, the kind that feels alive. Somewhere behind me, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the floor. Max barked then, a deep, desperate sound that echoed through the walls. I could hear his claws scratching at the wood, running from room to room as if chasing something invisible. When the lights finally came back on, Max was gone. The house was still. I called his name again and again, my voice cracking until all that came out was silence. Hours passed. Then, just before dawn, I heard scratching at the door. I opened it slowly. Max stood there, covered in dirt, his eyes dull and distant. He limped inside and collapsed by the fireplace, too weak to move. His breathing was shallow again, the same as that first night. I knelt beside him, tears filling my eyes. "It's okay, buddy. You're home. You're safe." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. He looked up at me, one last time, and I saw something flicker behind those eyes, a reflection, a memory, or maybe a goodbye. Then he went still. Completely still. I pressed my ear to his chest, hoping, begging for another miracle. But there was nothing. Just the sound of my own heartbeat. I stayed like that for hours, unable to accept it. I'd lost him once before, but this time I knew there would be no coming back. When the vet came to take him, I couldn't watch. I sat on the porch staring at the trees, waiting for the sun to rise. And when it finally did, the light hit the forest in a strange way, illuminating a narrow path between the pines, the same direction Max had run toward that night. For a moment, I thought I saw him there, standing at the edge of the woods, tail wagging, head tilted, waiting for me. But when I blinked, he was gone. Later that day, I checked the footage from the camera. Most of it was static, white noise. But near the end, just before the power cut, the screen cleared for a few seconds. In that brief window, I saw the living room, the door slowly opening, and behind Max, a figure stepping into view. A woman in a blue dress, Emily. Her hand rested gently on Max's back, guiding him forward, and together they vanished into the dark. I never watched the video again. The days after Max's second death felt slower than any time I can remember. The house was quiet again, too quiet. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watchful. Every creak in the wood, every soft gust through the trees outside seemed to carry something of him, some faint echo of the life that used to fill this place. I tried to keep busy, to wash away the heaviness, cleaning his bowl, folding his old blanket, sweeping the paw prints that would never come back. But every time I passed the fireplace, I found myself stopping, looking, listening, half expecting him to be there. I told myself I'd let him go this time, no more denial, no more miracles. Death, I thought, had finally done what it was meant to do. But late one evening, as I sat by the fire, I noticed the strangest thing. The old wristwatch I'd left on the mantel, the one that hadn't worked in years, was ticking again. The hands were moving backward, slowly, deliberately. I picked it up, staring at it in disbelief. The sound of each tick filled the room, steady and cold. Then, faintly, I heard a sound behind me. Claws on the floorboards. Thigh turned too fast, heart pounding. Nothing, just the shadows shifting in the corners. Still the scent of wet fur hung in the air. I whispered, "Max." The word felt strange, leaving my mouth, like I was calling into a place I shouldn't. The ticking grew louder, echoing against the walls. Then it stopped. That night I dreamed again. I was walking through the woods, the same path I'd seen that morning. The light was dim, the trees whispering softly in the wind. Ahead of me, a small shape moved between the branches. Max. His tail wagged once, slow and deliberate. Beside him walked Emily. She turned to me, her expression gentle, her eyes brighter than I remembered. "You did what you could," she said. "Now rest." She reached out her hand. I wanted to take it. God, I wanted to, but I stopped. "What are you?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "What you loved." what you couldn't let go. Then, before I could say another word, they both faded into the mist, and I woke up with tears streaming down my face. The fire had burned low, just glowing embers left. But there, right beside my chair, was Max's collar. Clean, dry, warm to the touch. I don't know what really happened, whether it was grief, madness, or something far beyond what we understand. Maybe when Max opened his eyes that day in the clinic, something else opened with him. Maybe death isn't a door that closes, but one that swings both ways, just for a moment, if the love is strong enough to pull it. Now every night I still hear the faintest sound outside the window. A single bark, soft, distant, like a goodbye that never quite ends. And I smile, because I know that wherever he is, he's not alone. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. It really helps.